It's time for Talking Pictures Trivia. A quick friendly reminder, a DVD player spins counterclockwise. One notable exception is the Nintendo Wii.
Welcome to Talking Pictures Trivia, the podcast in which a group of geographically challenged friends explore movies through trivia as an excuse to keep their friendships alive. I'm one of these friends and today's host, Nick, and with me, as always, is
Tom.
Additionally, joining us as guests this week are
Patrick
and KJ.
Thanks for joining us. You may remember Pat from prior episodes such as Broken Blossoms, The Bride of Frankenstein, and The Fast and the Furious. KJ was also in a plethora of episodes, too numerous to count, and presently edits these for the enjoyment of all our listeners. Pat and KJ still conveniently like movies. For those joining us for the first time, we start off each episode with a movie quiz, as these pivotal questions will determine who earns today's trivia crown. In round one, each question is worth 1 point, and in round two, each question is worth 2 points. Then, once the fierce competition is over, we followed up with our famous movie rant where anything goes. Tom, tell us about today's movie.
Today we're going back to 1927. Turkey adopts the Gregorian calendar. Babe Ruth becomes the highest paid player in MLB history when he signs a 3-year, $70,000 per season contract, and Henry Ford announces that he is ending production of the Model T Ford. During all of this, F.W. Murnau's movie Sunrise was released in theaters alongside Metropolis, Wings, and The Jazz Singer. Although The Jazz Singer is considered the first talkie, Sunrise was Fox's first film released with a recorded soundtrack that would play with the film, making this the first Fox film that all audiences would have an identical sound experience. Sunrise is about a man and a woman who are simply known as the man and the woman, and they live on a farm, and he has since begun an adulterous affair with a woman from the city. The woman from the city convinces the man to take his wife out onto a boat and drown her, allowing the woman from the city and the man from the country to be together. However, the man loses his nerve. His wife and him, end up in the city together, enjoying a wild night of pleasure and falling back in love again. KJ, if you had one word to describe Sunrise, what would it be?
Intimidating. Nick?
Switcheroo. Pat?
Romantic.
And my word would be pleasure.
It's time for question 1.
How does the woman from the city summon the man? What does she do?
Locked in.
Locked in?
Locked in?
All right, KJ, with that very convincing lock-in, what do you have?
Well, I'm a little rusty on these questions. I don't remember. It was a silent film. Did she whistle from the boat? From the dock? Was it a whistle? Not the dock, the marsh. Did she whistle?
Okay.
Was it a whistle?
Nick, what do you have?
She was outside his window. So that's how she got him.
Okay, Pat, what do you have?
Yeah, she's outside his window, but she does whistle. Yeah, she whistles for him. So.
All right, and the whistlers win. Very good.
Wait. It's a silent film. I didn't hear a whistle.
Yeah,
I said he was outside the window.
You don't hear anything, but she goes.
Mhm.
You can see it.
Okay,
And they even
KJ
have
got the
these
whistle, but the
giant
wrong
sounds
location.
saying how-
I got the window. So I still don't understand how he's getting a point when I at least was in the right place.
She summons him with a whistle. She doesn't summon him with her presence outside.
I'm a guest now. I get guest privilege.
Okay, fine.
Salt and bread.
I should have
Wait, I
elaborated that
complain-
she
wait,
made a
Pat
noise
should
through
be
the window.
complaining.
I mean, I knew that. I didn't know how to say it. Okay, whatever. Moving on. She didn't just stand outside the window. Like, she communicated.
But that was the question. How did she do that? So anyway, I want to kind of talk about the setup here, and especially the kind of archetypal, maybe we could call them archetypal, maybe naturalistic positions that these characters are at the beginning, and how that beginning sets that up.
What do you mean by the naturalistic? Like where, like the fact that they're in the countryside?
What I
you
mean by that is much more like the kind of Emile Zola thing of like the kind of people in a situation that are driven by their kind of circumstance, right? The kind of like art should reflect science, and we should see people in as kind of biological creatures in a given context, and uh, see how those things play out. And that's kind of my reading, is that the film sort of starts there or is hinting at that.
I don't know if I'm answering the specific question there, but I did find it interesting how the farming folk found their way in the city. So I thought that was interesting. He thought he'd have to leave his wife to be with this other woman in the city to find happiness, when really all he did was bring his wife to the city to find happiness. So it's not exactly where you're going there, but that was something that I thought about roles and I guess I don't want to say role reversals. They just happen to go on a nice little trip there,
Mhm.
but that's what was the catalyst to bring it back.
I mean, there is certainly an element, though, to your point, Nick and Tom. It's like there's an element that it's like the countryside sort of has this like sort of a harsh reality of it, because they suggest a number of times like the farm's not doing well, and they have to sort of deal with the day-to-day difficulties. But there's this suggestion that no, if you just get rid of the farm and go to in the city, then everything will be great, because you can enjoy yourself and have fun in the city. You can't do that in the countryside, which doesn't actually really get undercut that much. Like there isn't that much of a suggestion. There is sort of the suggestion that the countryside is miserable, and in order to have a good time, they did need to go to the city, and they did need to get out of that particular environment in order to go sort of enjoy themselves. But there is also an element that, well, what if, I mean, and I'm just thinking a lot, but there's a suggestion that, well, what if the woman from the city never had come to the countryside? Then they wouldn't have had this problem in the first place. So there's an element of the countryside is harsh and difficult, but if and in order to rediscover that love, they had to go to the city. But if the city had never come to them in the first place, they would have been fine, and they wouldn't have had the problem. So there's a bit of a trade-off, I guess.
Tom, do you think it's natural for people to want to be in the city as opposed to in the rural?
No, I think the movie, I don't think the movie takes that position. I think I kind of agree with Pat on this, in that the city actually is a place of pleasure and fun and all that, and that there is this escape. It's interesting you bring up the point, like if she had never come, it would have never been a problem, probably. But I think there's this sort of hint at this kind of older style that you get from people like Frank Norris and Zola, of like, we are these kind of Darwinian creatures, and we're in nature, but we're also kind of shaped by our circumstances, and our kind of financial circumstances. And I think when the characters go to the city, it's just kind of like, no, none of that's true. We're gonna go and enjoy like this modern this modern society with all its trappings of wealth, and it's actually going to be very nice and very fun. We're not kind of like predetermined beast. So I think the movie is like entirely refuting that attitude that was kind of like the generation before it.
I do think that is the suggestion, that there is this idea that the city is not it does not need to be the sort of noir nightmare that sort of it often gets depicted as, in something, say, Broken Blossoms, which we did before. The idea there is clearly the city is, that she is crushed by leaving, or he is sort of crushed by leaving the sort of nice place and going to the sort of Asiatic purity and going to the city, and he gets crushed there. But the only thing, though, I do think is that I just don't think you can get away from is the fact that she is the woman from the city. Like, that is literally her name, that is her definition. So there is still an element here, though, that if you take that, there is still something about the city that can corrupt the countryside if it comes. So I don't know if the idea is, well, if the city stays the city and the country stays the country, then people from the country can go to the city and come back. But if the city comes to the country, then that's a bad thing. Like, I'm not really sure what the idea there is.
You also have to realize this is during the Roaring 20s. So if this was like 2 years later, I don't think they would have had the same exuberance of the city.
Probably
So,
more,
like
actually.
29 through 39 is the Great Depression time period, and this movie came out in 27. So it seems very to the times of what the city represents.
Yeah, I mean, during the Depression, like the movies about wealth were usually very positive. They were usually very escapist. So it was like, probably even more this.
I don't know about that. I mean, things like Gatsby, though,
Mm.
struggled during the Depression because people didn't want to just hear about rich people enjoying
But the movies
themselves.
did
It's
well,
I think
like
that-
Gold Diggers of 33 and things like
Oh, okay,
that.
that
They
I
did,
don't
yeah. I think it's also the only thing anybody could afford.
Actually, you're right, because I'm thinking things like
Yeah.
Philadelphia Story and stuff like that. So never
It
mind,
was
I
like
see
a
that.
really successful play and then feature. Yeah, but I think to your point, I'm not entirely sure what to make of she is the woman from the city and therefore this like corrupter or what have you. Other than what I think you get out of that main character, the man, is he is very like kind of ape-like and big, and he's he's kind of awkward, and he sort of responds to things in a less than genteel way. Yeah. So he just like, if an attractive woman whistles at him, he's gonna go sleep with her or try to sleep with her. If somebody insults his woman, he's gonna stab him in the face in a very, very unusual scene that was in the middle of the movie.
You
I
just
love
cut their
that scene.
flower
That
off,
scene
you
was
know?
great. I love that scene.
I didn't expect him to stab him though. I was shocked by that. I was like, oh wow, that was, but he's still like this like kind of big kind of gorilla man. And I think it's just like the woman from the city. Though you're right, you can't get away from the fact that she's from the city. She's also this thing that's there to tempt him, right? That kind of brings out that kind of animal thing that he is. The separating of the country and the city is I don't think that's simple. I don't think we could just say one is for one thing and one is for the other.
It's time for question 2.
What illegal activity does the piglet engage in?
Locked in.
Locked in.
Does this movie take place roughly the year it was released? Do we know that? Is that or are we assuming that?
Yeah, we can assume that. Mhm.
All right. Locked in.
All right, KJ, what do you have?
The pig drank the wine, didn't he?
Mhm.
Was this during the Prohibition?
All right, Nick, what do you have?
The pig did drink the wine. I'm making sure I'm answering the question that was asked.
Yes, good. And Pat, what do you have?
To be fair, I don't think that drinking wine was illegal during Prohibition. It was
Oh.
the transport and sale of, or the manufacturing specifically of liquor that was illegal.
So if someone bought the pig after he drank the wine,
Mhm.
Well, as an
That-
example, my
because-
favorite thing I ever heard about Prohibition was that the Yale Club in New York City was so worried about when the Prohibition was announced, they bought like a 25-year supply of liquor and could continue to serve it as long as they were not purchasing new liquor. So actually, so in answer to your question, Tom, I think you are going for the fact that he drank the wine. However, the drinking of the wine specifically would not have been illegal during.
Ah.
I'm gonna go against Pat on this one. 18th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution
does not prohibit
adopted in
consumption.
1920s and made the making, selling, possessing, and consuming of alcoholic drinks illegal. So,
But you were still,
per the
however,
internet,
the law that actually was made to enforce the amendment.
I'm
did
sure they're not
not-
going after everyone who has a drink. In
But
their
it's not even a
hand.
question. It's not even a question. There was not specifically for example, people could purchase kits to make their own alcohol at home. That was acceptable, became quite popular. So you actually could make your own alcohol at home as long as you didn't sell it.
Does the 18th Amendment apply to all animals or specifically pig? Like, where does the
So
You guys got the
specifically
point.
So I am going to go. So since clearly Tom is looking for the answer, and since I got in trouble last time for giving an answer,
I think he already gave us
thought
the
it was more
points.
clever. Yes, he drank the wines. We'll go with that.
He drank the wine. All right. So I wanted to bring this up just to talk about the party scene, the kind of the extended set. Apparently, it cost $200,000 to build that urban set, and I wanted to talk about what we thought of it, how it factored into the film viewing experience.
So I loved the first act. I was like, all right, this is a Halloween movie. It felt like The Godfather Part 2 when they're getting on the boat. And then they get to the second act after they go to the wedding. And the movie completely changes into this party. And when the pig came on the screen, I'm done. I'm done with this movie. Why are we watching this pig now? Why? And then the cook, I guess, sees the small ghost and gets scared. I was like, oh, I love this movie again. This is great. So I loved the party scene. It was great. I enjoyed it. It was like a sunrise, right? Like, it's bright, beautiful.
I think some of it went a little long for my taste. They were dancing for a very long time. So just certain scenes I think could have been condensed. But again, that's just a personal, preference. When you have a silent film and they're doing repetitive tasks over and over again, really not much is changing in the routine. It just kind of filled up some time for me.
I liked when they got to the end though, and because I think they order their drinks or whatever, and then he doesn't have enough money to actually pay for the drinks when the actual bill comes. Like, I think that there is, and so she gets to go, she gets to have her moment where she can contribute to the party and finish and pay for their drinks as they're sort of leaving. But there is, I mean, I do think it goes a little bit long. There's certainly an element one could make that case. But I think it's certainly an effective scene.
So Pat, for that scene where she pulls out the wallet or whatever to pay for it, Rachel, my wife, had actually come down and was watching a little bit with me, and she was shaking her head. But I like to imagine in the movie theaters in 1927, 28, whenever they were watching this, somebody turning to somebody else like, did you see that? Like, that was probably a big punchline for that.
Yeah, it's a punch. I think it's clearly
right?
a punchline.
Yeah. And it probably landed a lot better in 27 or 28 than it did. So,
there's only so many
back
people who
then
could
as-
validate that alive right now, KJ.
That's true. Maybe. Right? In theaters at that age.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because all of this happens more or less after the dramatic conflict has been resolved, and they introduce another dramatic conflict towards the end where maybe she drowned, and we all kind of know she didn't. And but this entire sequence is kind of, I could go, this is like the post denouement film. The whole movie takes place after the major suspense has been
Well,
resolved.
that's why I thought we were going to be watching a different movie. When I saw the general tagline or the premise of what was going on, I thought there was going to be more of that back and forth. And we were talking, KJ, I think, mentioned Act 1, Act 2. Those are definitely not equally distributed. There's like the setup and then the city. I mean, the balance is a little off there. I kind of wish there was more of that conflict, although I did still enjoy the film. I don't want to make it sound like I was harsh on the film, but it was, I think I wanted more of that conflict.
Yeah, I mean, it's, you can think of it that way, or it's like it's building to the city experience, right? It's kind of building to the redemption, and also the pleasure of the redemption, this kind of like marital bliss. That's really what the film is showing, or what the film is climaxing with. It's not with this kind of, is he going to kill her or isn't he going to kill her? That seems to be this kind of thing that once you get out of this kind of this natural world, and you can kind of like get away from those forces. You can like go into this urban place, which is kind of magical, and there you can kind of reconnect with your wife, or enjoy yourself. And it is an escape. It is an escape from these kind of natural forces in this natural landscape that's on these people.
She forgave him pretty quickly, right? All told, right? He was going to kill her, and he started crying at a wedding, and she's like, "Oh, all right, well,
Mhm.
let's go out for a night on the town." Like it's
I don't know about any of you,
Also-
but that scene where he was like looming over her on the lake, it actually reminded me of Frankenstein. The way he kind of was above and just his general posture and demeanor. And of course, I was already thinking people getting thrown in lakes, I think of Frankenstein. So yeah, it just reminded me of Frankenstein.
The only thing I'll throw out, Tom, is that I do think that it's not. There is still some dramatic tension at this point, because there is sort of a sensation of like, is this going to stick, type
Mhm.
thing? Because I couldn't remember actually how it ended, because I was like, I remember that she falls in the boat, but I couldn't remember if she died, or I couldn't remember what happened. So I was like, so at the same time that you're sort of like, well, yes, they clearly have reconciled. He's not likely going to kill her, but what is going to happen when he gets back home?
Mhm.
And whether or not he sort of falls back into his old pattern. So I think, because it's certainly like, let's put it this way, you certainly couldn't imagine that movie of them just getting to the scene in the church and then sort of them going back,
Mhm.
because you would sort of just assume that like whatever had happened during this period wasn't actually going to work. Like there has to be some sort of like rebuilding of the relationship. So there is still some sensation of dramatic tension at that point as to whether or not it's going to work.
I just wanted to correct something for all my cinephiles out there. Of course, I meant Frankenstein's monster. So before you leave tons of hate mail or comments in the.
I thought
podcast.
you were just referring to Frankenstein
Or
the film
YouTube.
when you said
Yes.
said,
Yeah, I thought they're just the
Yeah,
product.
you were just
Yeah.
saying I thought of Frankenstein in
Good save.
quotes
Though-
the film.
That one.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes,
though
I
I
did.
would welcome mail of any type.
yeah,
for
that's
this
fine.
show.
Hate mail,
Please.
anything.
I
Yeah,
want to hear your hate mail.
Bring it on. Yeah,
Is
that's
this
fine.
me just stoking the fire?
Yeah, I think that's a good point. That is this going to stick? Is this going to hold? Is something else gonna like take him aside, right, or take him back into his old patterns?
Well, so I was watching, and Rachel was there, and I kept telling her over and over again, there is no conflict in this film anymore. And she's like, well, then she's gonna die, right? That was she immediately thought that's the obvious conclusion, that the wife's gonna die. And then she left, and then I was like, oh, you were right there. She kind of drowned, saved by the bulrushes. But
Yeah, I don't know. I think by the time of the dance, I was pretty confident that they were going to be fine.
By that point, you are confident
Mhm.
because they've
Yeah.
spent all this time building up to it. Okay, yes, this relationship
Mhm.
is going to last, and this isn't just a temporary thing. Yes, I agree, but I think that that's my point. Is if you just stopped after the wedding, or just after the barber scene, or one of these things, like you need to actually take the time to rebuild their relationship, which they do throughout the course of all these different events. I think if you don't do that, then it doesn't work. You don't get the sensation that this is permanent.
Yeah. It feels it feels truncated. Or, even if she's not in danger anymore, it's not even if she's not in danger anymore, it's not going to be a rich marriage. All right, at the end of round 1, we have a tie between Pat and KJ with 2 points a person, and Nick is there with 1. In round 2, each question is worth 2 points, so stick around to see what happens.
Hi, Tom here. Our sponsor today is called Ultra Bag, the new ultralight, washable, and biodegradable shopping bag that folds up and fits into a purse or handbag. I had to look that up on my own because this is the copy the company sent to us. These large bags can carry a lot of confidence and humor, and people may try to keep their valuables on the road, on the side of the road, or try to do something. The soup bag is very beautiful and can carry a lot of interesting products and help people store their valuables when they go or try to do some things. The soup bag helps the housewife to act the highest level and removes the challenges of everyday life. Find your demons with the soup basket. Do you want to be a fantastic guy? Grab the kids by the heads and put them in this killer. Take one house a day. Ultra bag. Good bag. What do you want?
And we're back. We're at the critical point of our episode where we ask the guests a key question. This one goes out to both Pat and KJ. If you could watch sunrise with anyone, dead or alive, who would it be? Pat, how about you start us up?
I would want to watch it with Alfred Hitchcock because I do love the opening because, as people said, there is this sort of like suspense thing. It does have this kind of like psycho feel to it, of sort of this the knife coming through the curtain when he's standing in the boat. And I think it would be fascinating to see sort of his impression of the film, which I'm sure he watched. Can't imagine he didn't, but I would love to hear his impression.
I was going to say, if you go back in time, you probably could have watched it with him in the theater and see if that punchline KJ was talking about was quite the knee slapper.
Actually, that's totally correct.
do you think,
That's totally
Al?
correct. He would have been alive. He totally would have been alive. Well, he would have been at a film watching age at that point. That's a good point.
Yeah, in his 20s, I think.
Certainly. Yeah. Didn't even think about that.
1899 he was born. I just knew that off the top of my head, I swear.
Oh, it's Faulkner's year.
So I got to watch this a little bit with my wife, Rachel, but I'd love to sit down with Rachel and really enjoy this movie with someone you're in a relationship with. I mean, that first act would be a little tense.
Really?
Maybe like,
Especially when you got that friend visiting from the city. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
Just make sure the dog is outside. Make sure the dog is not
running to the boat. But that second act would be a really lovely scene to enjoy with Rachel, with my wife.
It's time for question 3.
What does the man buy the woman when they first go to the city?
locked in.
Locked in.
Locked in.
All right, KJ, what do you have?
I'm just gonna guess flowers. He buys her flowers.
Nick, what do you have?
Oh, wait. A picture.
I don't know if that matters.
What do you do? Which one are you going with, KJ?
The picture. Definitely the picture. I'm going with the picture.
Hey, Nick, what do you have?
I'm not going with the picture or whatever KJ said before that. He bought her some kind of like biscuits and she was very hesitant to eat them.
Yeah, I was waiting for one of your round robin ones where you had to list everything that he bought her. So I made a list of them all. He buys her bread. Yeah, he buys her bread at the little cafe shop.
Oh, but he buys her flowers first.
Oh,
Does he?
No, boy.
Flowers
Wow.
first,
I
yeah.
thought he bought the
Wow.
bread first. No.
KJ, so close.
I know that
The
would have
picture
been the
was
episode
after when they were
possibly.
happy times.
Brutal.
Yeah.
Yikes.
Oh,
They were
no
smooching.
one gets- Mhm.
That was a very good question, though. I don't know if we had questions where everyone's gotten them wrong.
We've had a few with KJ. I don't know if you were on, Pat.
Yeah, I don't know. Anyway,
There's a
sorry.
few where we got them all wrong.
Good question, Tom. Good question.
Yeah. So I wanted to. Part of this was we actually covered a lot of questions in the discussion. So there was a bit of selection here, but I did want to talk about the relationship between these two people, and specifically about the performances. This was the first actress Academy Award went to the actress playing the woman this year, which back then was for your performances within a year, not just one performance, which is a far better way of doing it, I think. Just, how good was your year? It's much closer to like MVP baseball thing than whatever the hell the Oscars
That's
are now.
tough these days, though, right? Like how
I don't know. I think
many
it makes you a
movies-
bit more
it would just be-
selective because you can't just go and like do one, sort of like, movie at the end of the year that's your Oscar bait, like, and then do 15 Marley and Me's at the beginning of the year. Like,
My only, not to
gotta-
go on not to go on a tangent though, but I feel like only the popular people would be in contention when you would, whereas now in the system, you could have someone that could be their debut and get credit for it. That's the only thing that I would say. But
Yeah.
again, not the purpose of this discussion. I know.
So what do people think of that relationship? and those performances.
She's quite, again, in sort of silent films, there sort of is an element. There is, she is quite expressive. She's quite
Mhm.
good with because there's a lot of things that she does. I mean, part of it also has to do, I think, with just her makeup and hair, and they actually do a very good job of sort of keeping her hair in certain ways. It's very tight and done up like in a bun at the beginning, and it sort of slowly kind of falls down, I think. But she does have she is a very expressive actress, and I think, Tom, you said earlier that he has this kind of animal-like quality. Like, it does remind me of like Eugene O'Neill's hairy ape kind of thing. Like there is a very kind of quality of something like that. So I think they're both, it's quite effective. I mean, I obviously I like silent films. I think they're fun, and so I think that this is a particularly interesting one. I think a lot of good performances are in there. That don't, there's I guess I would put it this way, even throughout the film, there's very few, sometimes the silent films get a lot of bug eyes, and they get lots of weird things that people do. You only kind of get that a few times, like with, like, for example, the waiter, when he's like drinking the wine, does the weird bug eye kind of thing. But I think throughout the film there are a lot of very good performances from a lot of the actors and actresses.
Mm-hmm.
You ever hear of face blindness?
Yes.
I think they say Brad Pitt has it.
Propagnosia is the.
Is it? So I think I have acting blindness. Like, remember, I can't really tell a good perform. I mean, every so often you can, but like Anthony Hopkins, sure. But remember when we watched Infinity Chamber, Tom, the one where the guy's stuck in the prison and he doesn't know if he's out or not?
Yeah.
And there was the girl from that coffee shop.
Mhm.
On that episode, you said she was.
Yeah, she's pretty awful. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I love, like, so I don't think I'm a good judge of these.
I could see that they were subpar actors.
Oh, really?
No, not this movie.
In Infinity
Infinity
Chamber, yeah. Going back to Sunrise, yeah, I like the performances a lot. She has, like, I think my favorite moment from her is when he's rowing the boat to take her out to kill her, and she's like leans all the way over to see his face, and it's this kind of like little flirty movement. She doesn't quite know what's happening, but she's very excited to go out and go to the city, and it's this like lovely little moment that I watched a few times in getting ready for this episode, that I really enjoy. And I think what I like about his performance is that he kind of never loses that bestial thing, even when he's softening or becoming more sympathetic. There's still this kind of like lumbering aspect to him, like when they're looking for the woman's body, and he's just leaned over the boat with the lamp in the water. That kind of physical work I really liked a lot, even though I think he's much more what you might say showy than she is. It still was it still was, I think, very effective, especially since, like you said, Pat, he has a kind of hairy ape quality.
He's Yank from the Harry.
Yeah, Yank from the Harry. Yeah, it's a Eugene O'Neill play from, what year was it? 19.
Right around.
Yeah, right around
27.
Yeah.
I think it is 1927.
Yeah. So so that there's yeah. Well, I won't say they're in conversation with each other, but they're both drunk from the same thing, right? They're both drunk from expression.
Oh, early. It's 22. It's 22.
Okay. Yeah. But they're both drawing from, Murnau and O'Neill are both drawing from like German expressionism, just to vastly different ends. Murnau was kind of like very celebratory of kind of the sort of shows of wealth, and O'Neill is not, to say the least. But I thought that was interesting too. Was like, oh, this like hairy ape thing, this kind of German expressionism has this product in very different ways throughout the 20s.
It's time for question 4.
What is the name of the song that the man and woman dance to?
Locked In.
Oh, you mean the one that was not included in the intertitles of the movie?
Oh, you see the name of the song. They tell you.
You do?
Mm-hmm. How would I know?
Well, Tom doesn't always play by the rules. So that's why I totally thought I caught him, but I did not, apparently. KJ, were you in the same boat, or?
Yeah, I figured Tom looked it up afterwards, or
yeah, that's
was
what I
just
thought.
familiar
Too.
with it from all the dances he goes to in the big city. I don't know.
I can't even guess from that era.
Was it in the intertitles, or was it on the like a Was it in the back? Like, was it
It's not in
on
the
a
intertitle.
marquee or
I'm going to
something?
give you a hint. Yeah, it wasn't in the intertitle.
And was it referring to the song when we saw it, or?
Yeah, it's clearly referring to the song.
Okay. Locked in with a joke, I guess.
I don't even know if I locked in or not.
I go for it. Lock it.
Locked in.
All right, what do you got, Nick?
Kicking it in the big city.
All right, KJ, what do you have?
The electric slide.
All right, Pat, what do you
Boogie,
have?
boogie, woogie.
It is the peasant's dance. The peasant's dance.
Yes, yeah, the
Very
midsummer
fitting.
peasant's dance. Yeah,
Do we know what city this is, by the way?
it's modeled after Berlin, but it's sort of a non-space, I think.
Those were some pretty roaring seas to get from their little farm to this big city. Seemed like an ocean.
You've been to Berlin, Pat? I wasn't.
I've been to Berlin, but let's put it this way: not much of it looks like that
Yeah.
anymore.
Yeah, I think it's, well, there's a good reason for that. But I think it's also fairly a kind of a non-space, the urban setting. It's my own reading of it is that it kind of draws from Italian futurism, which has these kind of images of the urban where it's just kind of like material on top of each other in the painting. So like different metal brackets and steel things kind of on top of each other with like a kind of odd looking figure in front of it. And the film kind of looks like that. It has that kind of layering of these kind of urban structures on top of each other. They don't quite physically make sense, but they are really cool to look at. This is one of the things I like about this movie. Another thing I like about this movie is that it, like, you could clearly see all the past influences, like the futurism and the expressionism and the naturalism, and it sort of doesn't care about any of them. It just takes what it likes from them, but it doesn't embody any of them at all. It doesn't have the techno futuristic war loving stuff of the futurist, or the kind of the sort of sadness or angst of the expressionist, or the kind of, whatever theories, Darwinianism of the naturalist. It's just sort of like, screw all that crap. Let's just go have fun and have a party.
It's Gesamtkunstwerk.
Yeah.
Tom, I want to go back real quick though to the setting. You said it was inspired by Berlin.
It might have been.
Is the setting U.S.? Because I didn't get any European vibe to this at all.
It was made.
I thought Chicago.
Actually Chicago is kind of the one that jumped out at me. I don't even know why.
It isn't. My understanding is it isn't. It's not supposed to be any place. It's just.
But it's funny, Pat. You said Chicago. Like, I don't know why. I just.
Yeah, I've never been to Berlin. It kind of looks like the White City from Chicago. It might as well be, because that was kind of a great demonstration of the modern urban. But I think it's honestly just not a real place, and it's not supposed to be.
Tom, where did they display the song?
You see the sheet music on a trumpet.
Oh.
So the guy, and then that's when he won't dance, and she kind of prods him into dancing. So you see him take the sheet music out and put it on, and then the song plays.
Yeah, I thought they literally saw them and picked the music for them. That was the impression I got. Is that it was literally suggesting that this is for these peasants.
Nice band, not nice.
Yeah.
Well, they knew the dance, so they weren't too wrong.
Yeah.
So another big part of the set, and I think I'm using that word very loosely, was the film style he used, where he would have two things against each other. Like there was a shot with a train coming out of a tunnel and a train going the other way. I think he blocked half the film in the camera and then very carefully added the other piece in. So I also feel like a lot of the sets were influenced by that technique. Right, when we see the shots of the cities and stuff, it's not necessarily one set. Sometimes he's layering multiple things together to give that impression of the. I never heard the word before, but the Italian futurism may have come from some of that, possibly.
I also like that overlay technology, KJ. And that's why I didn't know this at the time when even in our own intro, we were talking about how the talkies were beginning. I'm not surprised this was a film from the later part of the era of the silent film.
And we should also talk about the rush for synchronized sound, because this movie was a big part of that contention.
I was shocked how much that the sound coincided with it, because again, I didn't remember it that much, and
it was great. The music was great in this film.
But it's just like as Tom said, the diegetic sounds, which I know but originally I thought, oh, one of the questions is going to be, to list the diegetic sounds.
All did.
And I went, okay, no, there's just way too many. They're all over. And they've got, some of them are just like bells, or some of them are like, they almost even sound like they had some voice recordings, even like, sort of, like yarble background sounds. But there's a great one, which I loved, when they're in like a barn and a horse sticks its head out and they have a trombone or something. Like, I just love these. Like, those are, the sound is really, really fun throughout the film, and is used to really cool effect. Like, I love when they're going through the when they're looking for the body on the boats and they have that trumpet doing the like, and I'm like, oh, that's cool. Like, I just
pretty good impression really
right
there.
I was gonna say the sound is interesting because it's like the Jazz Singer is obviously the first film with synchronized sound, but apparently that beat this movie by 2 weeks to theaters. So this would have been that, because the Jazz Singer basically has, the only synchronized sound in it is like Al Jolson gets up and sings, and that's it. The rest of the movie is silent. And so they used similar technology but different. This had something called movie tone, and the Jazz Singer had a different type of technology. But the Jazz Singer had basically a record you would play during the movie, but this had actually in the film a place where if the light went through it, it created a sound.
Oh wow!
So you could actually play
this one.
Oh, that's
cool.
Yeah,
that's shocking.
It is. Yeah, you could actually still, if you I think even an LED movie projector, if you could get the light to shoot through it, will make the sound, because it's about light going through this space. And that was something like William Fox, the man for whom Fox is named, who brought Murnau to the States to make this movie. He like bought up the component technologies to make this thing, and so there was this like really this kind of like runoff to see who would get this movie out, who would get the synchronized sound out first, and apparently the Jazz Singer won by a nose.
I'm actually curious of whether, do you know this, Tom, like, how did future films manage to synchronize sounds? Which, were they using this sort of like actually synchronizing the sound with the film, or was it just you played the thing and you hoped it lined up at the right time?
I thought they were different I thought there were different what's the word I'm looking for?
Well, it's sort of like which one won? Was it 8-track or was it the cassette tape? Like, I feel like they're different ones. Which one won?
Oh, I don't know. Oh, I think they moved on to a different,
I don't
technology.
know.
I'm not sure how long this lasted. I'm surprised it didn't last. My guess is that you can only do so much. Like, you could only put so many sounds in there, or you might only be able to get a certain quality of voice.
I'm just shocked. I just think that's so cool.
Yeah.
I just think the technology of sound and matching films, I just assumed they always did just taking a record player and you just put the record player out and hoped you got it to start at the right time.
Ready, go.
Yeah, exactly. But I feel like that's what it was. And that's why, if the voices didn't line up or if it seems slightly off, I assume that's just how it works. I'm fascinated that there was an alternative. I didn't know it existed.
Yeah.
So another thing, this is a very late silent film. The intertitles were pretty cool, right? That guy doing the intertitles was getting into it. Some of the words like kind of drowned, right? There's animation to the, I appreciated that a lot, right? It's like a modern day DVD menu. Like, it's a lost art.
Was that Carl Mayer who did that? I think he because how they did
You're the only one who will be able to answer that question.
One of my favorite
I'm just gonna
intertilers,
say
Carl
yes.
Mayer. He just
so Carl
Actually,
Mayer
Carl Mayer did the scenario. Is that what that
did the
means?
scenarios. Okay. So what you would do
yeah,
is you
yes.
would write out the scenarios, and then you would later write out the actual lines of dialogue. So they came after the fact. Carl Mayer should be familiar to us because he wrote the scenarios for another movie we did, The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari.
Nice.
So he was actually a very
Earlier in his career, of course.
yeah, the previous decade, but he was a pretty prominent German writer through the teens and 20s.
That's interesting because the version you watched had the German subtitles with the cool lightning bolts, I'll call them. I actually didn't see them. The version Nick and I watched for that, they were English subtitles. So I don't think it was Carl Mayer's subtitles that we saw.
I watched it with English. What did you watch? Oh, Cabinet.
The title cards. The
title cards. I thought you were talking about this movie in German. I'm like, there was a German. Well, I don't know that.
Berlin, right?
Yeah, I don't know if he wrote the actual intertitles. Mayer might have written the scenario. So you would hire a different person to write the intertitles, and usually they would film a number of scenes that could relate to a number of different intertitles and just see which one they liked more. So the scenario actually opened the movie up to a number of different possible scenes in a number of different places.
I think it's worth noting though that this film has surprisingly few intertitles, even for a silent film. Like there can't be more than maybe a dozen.
Yeah, if that.
I really don't know. Yeah, there are very, very few intertitles in this film, which I was shocked. Like it was very unusual.
Yeah, that was considered. That was a marked thing. Having few intertitles was considered a skill. You were a good filmmaker if you had fewer intertitles. I guess it's like the equivalent of today, if you can make a movie with almost no exposition, then you're making it more dramatic.
It makes sense. You don't need the words as a crutch to tell the story.
Yeah, that's kind of how it was thought. Yeah. So
I mean, it's think of like the worst Ed Wood films where you just have like somebody just literally sitting there like talking as you zoom in on something. Like that's an Ed Wood film.
Yeah.
So
yeah, and there was actually a contest between Buster Keaton and Charlie Chaplin around this time, a little earlier, who can make the movie with the fewest intertitles. And I forget who won, but it was something like 30. And this movie has far less than that.
It's time for Movie Rant.
All right, here we are at Movie Rant. Congrats to Pat for winning the episode. All right, gentlemen, do you have any interesting reads of this film? Anything you really like to talk about? Anything that caught your fancy?
The random scene where that guy kept having to fix the shoulder of the dress for the lady.
Yeah.
That was one of the ones that went on for a long time that for some reason I bought in on. Like I thought it was kind of funny.
That's the Simpsons like shovel joke where Sideshow Bob, where if you do it once or twice, it's funny. You do it 10 times, it's annoying. You do it 15 times.
He literally holds it up during her clapping, and then it falls anyway.
Yeah. No, that was during the dance scene.
But it was really funny.
Yeah.
At least I wasn't alone then. Okay, I'm just happy. No. I just wanted to bring it up. It's completely random in the film, but I will say I did enjoy it.
Yeah, no, you're not alone. I enjoyed that very much as well.
I just want to throw out one because I think it was really funny, which I loved, and I think it even fits in with like the dress falling over and all those kind of things. Because I think there is obviously like a sort of running motif of the relationship between men and women, but I loved at the ending when the guy who actually saved her and plucked her from the water, and he's like, "Oh yeah, I know I knew the waves or whatever," and he starts like with their maid, and he starts like flirting with her maid and starts like leaning up against her, and then the wife like pulls him away, right? And I love the fact that even in the fact that this man just saved this woman from death, and the whole scenario comes out because of adultery. Like he's literally sitting in front of his wife flirting with another woman. I thought that was just such a really wonderful little touch at the end of the film.
I wanted to bring, so there was one thing I want to bring up, if a little a little history of drowning people in boats that I actually think is somewhat important to this. Is
Wojciech?
Wojciech? Yeah, Wojciech. Oh God, that's another one. Yeah, because Wojciech really happened, right? That was well, yeah. So the like drowning people in boats trope, it kind of the I was trying to look into, because my reading of this is that basically it's kind of it has this kind of naturalistic start, and then it's just like, screw it, we're going to the city, and kind of overthrows that, or ignores or sidesteps, whatever you want to say, that those concepts or those ideas. And apparently, like, the boat thing, we see it in Therese Raquan, this Zola play, which was when he tried to come up with naturalism. In this play, it's about a cheating wife and her lover who try to drown the husband. But it's also in a kind of American naturalist, Theodore Dreiser. His, if you've ever read American Tragedy, with which was based on a real case, but it was from 1925. The book was published, and it was kind of like the 20s version of the Executioner's Song, but it has the same thing. It's kind of this like naturalistic thing where this guy drowns his pregnant girlfriend because she's pregnant, and that was also kind of considered part of this genre. And then you have the Wojciech thing that you mentioned. So
Well, Wojciech, I was thinking he tries to throw
Into
the
the-
knight
yeah, I
into
guess
the
it's a little
water,
different.
into
Yeah.
the lake.
But
yeah. It's different, but I still feel like there is still this element of like hide the evidence
Yeah.
in the water.
Yeah, Heidi, and I think like the boat thing where they're actually doing it in a boat is, I don't know, maybe I'm reading too much into it, but it seems to be speaking to these kind of past iterations, because like American Tragedy was a very big hit in 1925, and the case it was based on was also a sort of kind of crime of the century style case. And so I think like that to me is that's how I read the kind of halves of the movie. I know it's not exactly halves, but like the beginning is this sort of naturalistic kind of realistic thing, and it's sort of co-sponsor is this sort of romantic escape. And once you kind of experience the naturalism and you get away from that into this romantic escape, you can then go back home with something like a synthesis between those things. You're still you and a person in the world and whatnot, but there is fantasy, imagination, and pleasure that gets you out of those kind of constraints, the kind of constraints of the country. And so as much as the city is a danger to these people, I think it's also kind of the necessary romantic interlude that makes the country possible as well.
I'd like to once again congratulate our winner of the week, which is Pat. And based on that last question, I believe he definitely deserved it.
Yay.
Yeah, well done, Pat. Nice one.
In addition to our website, talkingpicturestrivia.com, you can find us wherever you listen to podcasts, as well as our YouTube channel. We are extremely grateful for any positive reviews, as those help others like you find us. If you like what you hear, remember to like and subscribe to our show. Do you think the plan with the bull rushes was a good one, and why? Or why not? Let's continue the conversation on Twitter at Talking Studios. Have additional thoughts? Email us at talkingpicturestrivia@gmail.com or give us a call at 201-467-8679 for a chance to be featured on one of our future From the Listeners episodes. Thanks again, Pat and KJ. You know what? Thanks everybody for joining us today. Where can people find you?
In Queens.
You can find me on Twitter at KJ10001000.
You can find me on Twitter at ThomasLehman15. There is a B-side that came out. I'm doing another one. Yeah, so the B-sides are back. No, I think mostly no one has listened to any of them, but they're coming back. So, and they're out. New ones are out now. So someone listen.
Yeah, just to plug a plug. I listen to them. I enjoy them. I like them, Tom. They're
good.
Yeah,
Thanks.
they're quite nice.
Yeah, you can't say no one. People
Entities
have listened.
have been contractually obliged to.
Some bot has scanned that.
And enjoyed it.
Very
On that note, I can also be found on Twitter at The Nicknamed. Join us next time when we discuss Tom's recommendation from Iceland in 2005, Rams. Stay tuned for our first impressions of this film.
Ding, 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 ding.
All right. So we're talking here 2015's Icelandic film Rams. And this is a first watch for me. I wasn't even aware of this movie. Apparently, they made a remake with Sam Neill a few years later. And I was also not familiar with the remake starring Sam Neill. And I have to say, I love this movie. KJ brought this to us. And he is a kind of last minute guest on this podcast. So I'm really, really excited. KJ was on this podcast with us. Steve would have been great too. I'm really excited KJ's on because I love this movie. And it isn't without its flaws, certainly. It's not a perfect film by any measure, but it really knocked me out. I saw a lot of overlap with it, and an Englishman goes up a mountain and comes down a hill. I thought this film and that film work almost kind of as companion pieces, the sort of the comic and the tragic versions of one another. And so I'm really, really excited to talk about this. How did I watch it? I watched it on my computer through a legal purchase, perfectly legal. And well, as usual, eating, I think, fish, probably shrimp this time. But I'm very excited to talk about this movie.
Is shrimp a fish? What are the rules on the crustaceans there, Tom?
I don't know. It probably is not a fish. So yes, I was eating a crustacean this time.
I guess it goes with fish. But Tom, I can't take credit for this movie. This was actually suggested to me by a fan of the show, friend of the show, old fan, Kagar. This is a Kagar recommend. And I also really enjoyed watching it a few years ago when Kagar recommended. I don't remember exactly how I watched it. But this time I watched it in my basement. And today's one of the first cold days here in the Philadelphia area. And I didn't realize how cold it was getting in the basement. And all of a sudden they go outside and it's real cold in the movie. And I realized I'm real cold. So it was kind of a nice way to watch this in a nice cold, frigid, your hands get real cold. You know that the feeling where you're trying to do stuff, but you're uncomfortably cold there for all of a sudden. And I think it really added to the movie. I enjoyed it.
I watched this movie on my phone. You guys asked me to take part in this podcast. Thank you again, of course. And I've been really excited to watch it for a long time. And unfortunately, that excitement didn't translate to me watching it, sufficiently ahead of time or anything. I watched it today on my phone. But like KJ said, it's quite cold here. And I thought it was really cool because the movie starts out kind of idyllic and green, and then gets cold. And I kind of felt like that's sort of how this day went, I guess. Just weather-wise, not mood-wise or anything like that, but just weather-wise. And I thought that was really fitting. I thought that was pretty cool.
This movie was a pleasant surprise. I never would have picked this one up off the shelf, but I did thoroughly enjoy it. Just like a few other people here, it was a first watch, but I had the unique ability and experience to watch this on not one, not two, but 3 different devices. I started it on an old iPad, then moved to the big screen via Apple TV, and then back to the new iPad, which was higher resolution. So I experienced this in multiple locations and eventually watched the whole film. But yeah, I did enjoy it. Looking forward to talking more about it.
What types of vehicles do the husband and wife stop on the street when kissing? This is types of vehicles. You don't have to name every single vehicle.
Locked in?
Locked in?
Locked in? Is this a trick question, Tom?
I think it
Cars?
must be a trick
I
question.
don't think so, yeah.
Trolleys, cars? Yeah. Trolley cars?
Was that your answer?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I was last to lock in. I just jumped at the gun. I don't know.
Mhm.
Automobiles. Things of automobiles.
Cars that actually have horns that are horns.
Okay. So I was expecting like a list of vehicles.
Oh, I thought
You
said one.
said you
I
said
thought
you didn't have
just...
to list them.
Be specific. Don't be
That's why I was like-
specific. So we went generic.
That's why, because I was like, I thought there was a horse there too. There was like a horse and buggy too. That's why.
Oh no, I don't. You don't have to list every single. Like you don't have to say there's 8 vehicles and they were this.
I just
this.
thought it was cool
The
that
types
they
of
actually had horns that were legitimately just like squeaking horns.
All right, let's scrap this. I got a better question.
Don't cut this, kid. Keep this.
Wait, is a horse a vehicle?
Well, there was
Horse
a,
and
no, there was
buggy.
like a horse
Let's
and
go.
buggy. There was a horse and buggy.
It was a horse and buggy.
Well, the buggy would
buggy's
be-
definitely.
It was a
vehicle.
horse and buggy.
Yeah.
It was a bus and a car.
I still don't
and a
know the
bike.
answer to that question. Were we supposed to list them?
It doesn't matter. We're moving.